The rain hammered against the window of Jung-ho's studio apartment in Gangnam, creating a steady rhythm that matched his melancholic mood. Scattered across his desk were half-finished sketches and abandoned concepts, each one a testament to his creative blockage since Soo-min left. The room, once a sanctuary of creativity, now felt more like a prison of memories. And if you want a handsome CEO in your life and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. Jung-ho sat in his ergonomic chair, absently rotating back and forth while staring at an unfinished logo on his tablet. The client had requested 3 revisions already, but he couldn't focus. His eyes kept drifting to the empty coffee cup on his desk, the one Soo-min had bought him last year, with its ridiculous motivational quote about chasing dreams. Now it just seemed to mock him. The studio walls, once covered in vibrant mood boards and inspiration pieces, were partially bare. He'd taken down anything that reminded him of Soo-min, leaving behind irregular patches of lighter paint and empty nail holes. The gaps felt appropriate. They matched the hollow feeling in his chest since he'd discovered those Instagram posts, the ones that revealed Soo-min's new life with the lifestyle influencer she'd met at a brand collaboration event. His phone buzzed, interrupting his spiral of self-pity. Jung-ho almost ignored it, assuming it was another concerned message from his mother or perhaps another client wondering about their delayed project. Instead, he saw an unknown number and a message that would unknowingly change the course of his life. Jung-ho SSI, this is Min-suk from TechMind Solutions. Your work on the Children's Hospital campaign caught my attention. I have a project that could benefit from your unique perspective. Would you be interested in meeting to discuss it? Jung-ho's finger hovered over the delete button. He'd been turning down new projects for weeks, barely managing his existing workload. But something about the message's directness made him pause. After a quick search, he found that Min-suk was indeed the CEO of a rising tech startup known for their innovative approach to mental health applications. The rain intensified as Jung-ho debated his response. His studio felt suddenly claustrophobic, the walls closing in with memories of better days. Perhaps this was the change he needed, something completely different from his usual corporate clients. With hesitant fingers, he typed out a response agreeing to meet. The following day, he found himself in the sleek offices of TechMind Solutions, feeling oddly out of place in his casual designer attire among the startup's modern decor. Min-suk, however, wasn't what he expected. Instead of the typical serious CEO in a business suit, he met a man roughly his age, wearing a comfortable sweater and radiating genuine warmth. Mental health shouldn't be a taboo subject, Min-suk explained, gesturing enthusiastically as he laid out his vision. We want to create a campaign that speaks to people who feel lost, who think they're alone in their struggles. Your work shows a deep understanding of emotional storytelling through design. Jung-ho shifted uncomfortably in his seat, aware that his own mental health had been far from stable lately. But as Min-suk continued to share his ideas, something stirred within him, a familiar spark of creativity he thought he'd lost. The campaign needs to be authentic, Min-suk emphasized, pulling up examples on his tablet. No stereotypical images of people holding their heads or sitting alone in dark rooms. We want to show the reality of mental health struggles while offering hope. For the first time in months, Jung-ho found himself engaged in a professional conversation that felt meaningful. Min-suk's passion was contagious, and his respect for Jung-ho's previous work seemed genuine rather than mere flattery. As the meet, concluded, Jung-ho realized he'd been taking notes unconsciously, something he hadn't done since Soo-min left. Looking down at his sketchpad, he saw rough concepts beginning to take shape, ideas flowing naturally in response to Min-suk's vision. Take some time to think about it, Min-suk said, walking him to the elevator. But I believe you're exactly who we need for this project. On the ride home, Jung-ho felt a subtle shift in his perspective. The rain had finally stopped, and patches of late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds. He looked at his reflection in the subway window and saw something different. Not just a man abandoned by his wife, but perhaps someone on the verge of a new beginning. Back in his studio, he found himself unable to return to his old projects. Instead, he opened a new document and began sketching concepts for Min-suk's campaign. For the first time in months, The creative process felt natural, unforced. The empty spaces on his walls didn't seem so glaring anymore. They looked more like blank canvases waiting to be filled with something new. The TechMind Solutions conference room had become Young-ho's second home over the past week. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of Seoul's skyline, but his attention remained fixed on the mood boards spread across the table. Min-suk sat beside him, sleeves rolled up, completely engaged in their brainstorming session. "When I was at my lowest," Min-suk said, breaking their concentrated silence, "I couldn't even tell my family. There's still such a stigma around mental health in our society." He traced his finger along one of Young-ho's preliminary sketches. "That's why this campaign needs to be different." Young-ho looked up from his tablet, surprised by the personal admission. Min-suk maintained his usual confident demeanor, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that felt familiar. "I spent 3 months barely leaving my apartment," Min-suk continued, his voice steady but quiet. "Everyone thought I was just working hard on my startup. In reality, I could barely get out of bed some days." He smiled wryly. That's actually what inspired TechMind's first mental health app. The confession hit close to home. Young-ho had been living his own version of that story since Sumin left. His fingers tightened around his stylus as memories flooded back. Evening walks along the Han River, planning their future over coffee in their favorite cafe. Sumin's excited chatter about her dreams of opening her own fashion boutique. "She used to say we'd grow old designing together," Young-ho found himself saying, the words escaping before he could stop them. "She'd handle fashion, I'd handle graphics. We had it all planned out." Min-suk nodded, not pushing for more details, but offering silent understanding. The space between them felt charged with shared vulnerability. "Dreams change," Min-suk said finally. "Sometimes they have to break completely before we can build new ones." He pulled up Young-ho's latest design concept on the main screen. "But look at this. There's still so much creativity in you, Young-ho SSI. Your work speaks to people who are struggling. It has depth now that maybe it didn't have before." Young-ho stared at his design. The concept centered around broken pieces coming together to form something new, incorporating traditional Korean elements with modern minimalism. He hadn't realized how much of his own journey he'd poured into it. "I've been playing it safe," Young-ho admitted, taking corporate jobs, following strict guidelines. "Even before Sumin left, I'd stopped taking risks with my work." Min-suk leaned back in his chair, studying Young-ho with interest. "Then let's change that. This campaign shouldn't just tell people it's okay to struggle. It should show them that breaking down can be the first step to breaking through." They worked late into the evening, ordering dinner when the sun set. Min-suk shared more about his own battle with depression and the resistance he'd faced when shifting TechMind's focus to mental health applications. Young-ho found himself opening up about the shame of being left for someone more successful, more social media savvy. "Your ex-wife's Instagram influence doesn't define your worth," Min-suk said firmly. "Look at what you're creating now, something that could actually help people heal." As they refined the campaign concepts, Young-ho felt his creative boundaries expanding. Min-suk challenged his initial ideas, pushing him to dig deeper, to infuse more emotion into each design. The work became both therapeutic and exciting. Around midnight, as they were packing up, Min-suk paused. "You know, Young-ho SSI, talent like yours shouldn't be hidden behind corporate logos and safe choices. This campaign could be just the beginning." Young-ho felt something stir in his chest, not the familiar ache of loss, but a flutter of possibility. He looked at the designs they developed, seeing not just a mental health campaign, but a reflection of his own gradual healing. Back home, Young-ho found himself unable to sleep. He pulled out his old sketchbook, the one he'd abandoned months ago. Page after page filled with new ideas, unrestricted by client guidelines or market expectations. For the first time since Sumin left, he felt not just creative but alive with purpose. His phone buzzed with a message from Min-suk. "Thank you for trusting me with your story today. This campaign will be special because it's real. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we push further." Young-ho smiled at the message, realizing that Min-suk had become more than just a client. In him, Jung-ho had found someone who understood both his professional potential and his personal struggles. The emptiness in his apartment didn't feel quite so overwhelming anymore. Late evening at Techmind's office had become routine for Jung-ho and Min-suk. The cleaning staff no longer gave them curious glances when they worked past normal hours. Tonight, they sat on the floor of Min-suk's office, surrounded by takeout containers and prototype designs. "I never told anyone this," Min-suk said, picking at his remaining japchae. "But I almost sold Techmind last year. A big tech corporation offered enough money to set me up for life." He glanced at Jung-ho. "They wanted to turn our mental health apps into data mining tools." Jung-ho set down his chopsticks. "What stopped you?" "I got a message from a user, a high school student. She said our app was the only thing that helped her feel less alone during her depression." Min-suk's voice softened. "Some things are worth more than money." The confession hung in the air between them. Jung-ho found himself sharing his own secret. "Sumin didn't just leave me for the influencer. She'd been planning it for months. I found drafts of her announcement post on her laptop. She'd been writing it while we were still planning our anniversary celebration." Instead of offering empty sympathies, Min-suk asked, "Have you talked to anyone else about this?" Jung-ho shook his head, but then remembered something. "Actually, my friends have been trying to reach out. I've been ignoring them." "Call them," Min-suk said firmly. "Tonight. The campaign can wait." Following Min-suk's advice, Jung-ho messaged his childhood friends, Taesung and Jiwon, who he'd been avoiding for months. To his surprise, they responded immediately, insisting on meeting at their old hangout, a small pojamika near their former high school. The pojamika hadn't changed in 15 years. The same red plastic chairs, the same soja brands, the same smell of grilled seafood. Taesung and Jiwon were already there, waving him over like no time had passed. "Look who finally emerged from his cave," Taesung teased, but his eyes were kind. Jiwon pushed a glass toward him. "We've been worried, you idiot. You can't disappear on us. Like that." As the soja flowed, Jung-ho found himself talking about everything: the campaign, Min-suk, his renewed passion for design. His friends listened, interjecting with their usual mix of support and playful mockery. "You sound different," Jiwon observed. "Like yourself again, but newer?" Taesung nodded sagely, already pink-faced from drinking. "It's because he's creating something meaningful instead of just corporate logos for washing machines." The night ended with promises to meet regularly and drunk-dialed karaoke plans for the weekend. Walking home, Jung-ho felt lighter than he had in months. The campaign launch party came faster than expected. Techmind had rented an art gallery in Hongdae, transforming it into an interactive exhibition of Jung-ho's designs. Each piece told a story of mental health struggles and recovery, incorporating augmented reality elements that connected to Techmind's apps. Jung-ho stood in front of his centerpiece, a massive digital installation showing how broken pieces could form new patterns of healing. The gallery was packed with industry professionals, media, and mental health advocates. "This is more than just a campaign launch," Min-suk said, appearing beside him. "Look around, people are really connecting with the message." He was right. Visitors weren't just taking photos for social media. They were engaging deeply with the artwork, sharing stories with strangers, downloading the app right there in the gallery. A young woman approached Jung-ho, tears in her eyes. "Your piece about rebuilding after betrayal, it's exactly how I felt after my divorce. How did you capture it so perfectly?" Before Jung-ho could respond, more people gathered around, each sharing their own stories of struggle and recovery. Min-suk watched from nearby, a proud smile on his face. Later, as the crowd thinned, Jung-ho found Min-suk on the gallery's rooftop terrace. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for the opportunity, but for pushing me to make it personal." Min-suk turned to face him, their shoulders nearly touching. "You did this, Jung-ho. You turned your pain into something beautiful and honest." His hand briefly touched Jung-ho's arm. "I'm just grateful I got to be part of it." The moment between them felt charged with possibility, but neither moved to break it. Below, Seoul's nightlight sparkled, and somewhere in the distance, Jung-ho could hear his friends calling his name, probably planning another round of celebration. For the first time since Sumin left, Jung-ho felt completely present in his life, not just surviving but truly living. The creative spark that had reignited during their first meeting had grown into a steady flame, warming not just his work, but his entire world. The success of the mental health campaign brought unexpected complications to TechMind. Jung-ho noticed the change one morning when he arrived at the office and found Min-suk in an intense discussion with a man in an expensive suit. Through the glass walls, he could see Min-suk's usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. "That's Park Sung-jin," Min-suk's assistant whispered as she passed by. "He's our biggest investor. He's been pushing for a broader market approach since the campaign went viral." Later that day, Min-suk called Jung-ho into his office. The usually organized space was cluttered with market research reports and competitor analyses. "They want to pivot," Min-suk said without preamble. "Sung-jin thinks we're limiting our market potential by focusing solely on mental health." "What does he want instead?" Jung-ho asked, though he could already guess the answer. "Everything. Fitness tracking, dating apps, social media integration, anything that'll bring in quick profits." Min-suk ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "He's threatening to withdraw his investment if we don't comply." Jung-ho picked up one of the reports. The proposed changes would transform their intimate, personal campaign into something glossy and commercial. Everything they'd worked to achieve, the authenticity, the emotional connection, would be buried under corporate buzzwords and trending hashtags. "It's like they didn't even understand what we created," Jung-ho said, his voice tight with frustration. "That's exactly the problem." Min-suk stood and walked to the window. "They see numbers, not people. Sung-jin's team has already drafted a new marketing strategy. They want to turn our mental health app into a lifestyle optimization platform." The phrase hit too close to home for Jung-ho. It reminded him of how Sumin had transformed herself for social media, gradually replacing authenticity with marketability. "We can't let them do this," he said firmly. Min-suk turned, surprise evident on his face. "You'd be willing to fight this with me? Your contract with TechMind is technically complete." "This campaign isn't just about mental health anymore," Jung-ho replied. "It's about being genuine in a world that wants to commercialize everything, including our struggles." Their conversation was interrupted by Sung-jin himself, entering without knocking. "Min-suk SSI, I hope you've reviewed my proposals." His eyes flickered to Jung-ho. "Ah, the designer. Your work is interesting, but it's time to think bigger." "The campaign is perfect as it is," Jung-ho found himself saying. "It's helping people." Sung-jin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Helping people is admirable, but this is business. We need to maximize our return on investment by exploiting people's vulnerabilities." Min-suk's voice was quiet but firm. "By giving the market what it wants," Sung-jin corrected. "Your users don't just want therapy, they want solutions. Fitness tracking, dating advice, career coaching. We can be the app that does it all."
Jung-ho watched Min-suk carefully.
They both knew what Sung-jin was really saying, conform or lose everything. That evening, alone in his studio, Jung-ho faced his own crisis of identity. His work with TechMind had given him purpose again, helped him heal. The thought of seeing it transformed into another soulless tech product made him physically ill. His phone buzzed with a message from Min-suk. "Can we talk?" "Not at the office." They met at a small tea house in a quiet neighborhood. Min-suk looked exhausted but determined. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About being genuine. And I started TechMind because I wanted to help people like me, people who felt alone in their struggles. If we let Sung-jin change our mission, we're no better than the companies that profit from people's insecurities." Jung-ho felt something shift inside him. Here was someone else who understood the cost of maintaining integrity in a world that valued profit above all else. "So, what do we do?" Jung-ho asked. "We fight," Min-suk said simply. "But I need to know if you're with me. This could get ugly, and you've already been through enough this year." Jung-ho thought about his journey since Sumin left, how working on this campaign had helped him find himself again. "I'm with you," he said. "Whatever happens." Min-suk's relief was visible. Their hands brushed as they reached for their teacups, and neither pulled away immediately. In that moment of connection, Jung-ho realized that this wasn't just about protecting their work anymore. It was about protecting something more personal, more precious, even if he wasn't ready to name it yet. Rain pounded against the windows of TechMind's office, echoing the tension that had built over the past weeks. It was past midnight, and Jung-ho and Min-suk were the only ones left in the building, surrounded by presentation boards and marketing reports they'd been reviewing to counter Sung-jin's proposals. Jung-ho stood at the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain.
Sometimes I wonder if I
am fighting this battle because of what happened with Sumin, he admitted quietly. Maybe I'm just afraid of losing something else I care about. Min-suk set down the report he'd been reading. What exactly are you afraid of? Everything. Jung-ho turned from the window. I'm afraid of failing, of not being enough. When Sumin left, she said I was too focused on the art, not enough on the business. That I didn't understand how to succeed in today's world. He laughed bitterly. Maybe she was right. Min-suk stood and walked over to him. Is that what you think success looks like? Compromising everything you believe in for more followers or a bigger profit margin? No, but Jung-ho stopped, struggling to find the words. I watched her transform herself completely for social media fame. Every post, every story, carefully curated to maximize engagement. And people loved it. They still do. Meanwhile, I'm here, fighting to keep our campaign authentic, wondering if I'm just being stubborn. Jung-ho-ya, Min-suk said softly, using the informal address for the first time. Do you know why I chose you for this project? Jung-ho shook his head. Because when I saw your previous work, even the corporate logos, there was always something genuine in them. Something human. You don't just design things to look good. You design them to mean something. The space between them seemed to shrink. Jung-ho could see the fatigue in Min-suk's eyes, but also something else, a warmth that made his heart race. I'm scared too, Min-suk confessed. Every day, I wonder if I'm making a mistake by fighting Sung-jin. His way would be easier, more profitable. But then I read messages from our users, people who say our app helped them through their darkest days, and I remember why we started this. Jung-ho felt something break inside him, not painfully, but like a dam releasing. When Sumin left, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. Never let myself be vulnerable. But working with you, he took a shaky breath. You make me want to try. Min-suk reached out, his hand gentle on Jung-ho's arm. Real love, whether it's for a person or a project, isn't about performing or meeting market expectations. It's about being authentic, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. Is that what this is? Jung-ho asked, his voice barely audible. Love. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Min-suk's hand was still on his arm, warm and steady. I think, Min-suk said carefully, it's something worth protecting, whatever we choose to call it. They stood there, the rain creating a cocoon of privacy around them. Jung-ho thought about how far he'd come since those first days in his empty studio, how this project had become so much more than just a campaign. Then we protect it, Jung-ho said firmly. The campaign stays as it is, honest, vulnerable, real. If Sung-jin can't see the value in that, it's his loss. Min-suk smiled, and Jung-ho felt his heart skip. Together then?
Together.
They spent the rest of the night reviewing their strategy, but something had shifted. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they felt manageable now, shared between two people who understood each other's worth beyond market valuations and social media metrics. As dawn broke over Seoul, they had their plan. The campaign would remain true to its original vision, a beacon of authenticity in a world of careful curation. More than that, they had found something neither of them expected when this project began, a connection built on mutual understanding, respect, and the courage to be real in a world that often demanded performance. The hashtag TechMind campaign was trending nationwide, but Jung-ho couldn't bring himself to read the comments. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, journalists requesting interviews, industry peers offering congratulations, and an increasing number of critical voices questioning their approach. You need to see this, Min-suk said, entering Jung-ho's temporary office at TechMind. He placed his tablet on the desk, displaying a popular tech blog's headline, TechMind's Mental Health Campaign, Genuine Innovation or Emotional Manipulation? Jung-ho skimmed the article, his stomach tightening. The writer questioned whether a tech company had any right to address mental health issues, suggesting the campaign was merely capitalizing on people's vulnerabilities. The comment section was even worse, with users dissecting every aspect of their work. There's more, Min-suk continued, scrolling through his phone. Some influencers are calling us out for being anti-progress because we won't integrate social media features. And he hesitated. Sumin posted about us. Jung-ho's head snapped up. What did she say? She called the campaign well-intentioned but naive. Said that modern mental health solutions need to embrace digital social connectivity, not resist it. Min-suk watched Jung-ho carefully. She tagged you in it. The familiar pain Jung-ho expected didn't come. Instead, he felt a strange sense of clarity. She still doesn't get it, does she? The whole point is that people need spaces away from constant social performance. Their conversation was interrupted by Min-suk's assistant rushing in. You need to see the live streams. People are sharing their experiences with the app. It's intense. They gathered around Min-suk's computer, watching as users across various platforms shared deeply personal stories about their mental health journeys and how TechMind's approach had helped them. A popular gaming streamer broke down crying while describing how the app had helped him cope with performance anxiety. A high school teacher showed how she used the campaign materials to discuss mental health with her students. This is what matters, Min-suk said quietly. Not the tech bloggers or the influencers. These real people, sharing real stories. But the negative voices were persistent. That evening, Jung-ho found himself tagged in a viral thread criticizing the campaign's design elements as too depressing and triggering. Some users claimed the authenticity angle was just another marketing gimmick. How do you handle it? Jung-ho asked Min-suk over late-night coffee in the office. The constant criticism, the public scrutiny? Min-suk considered the question. I focus on our user stories. The ones who message us privately, who aren't looking for likes or retweets. They're the reason we're doing this. A notification popped up on Jung-ho's phone, another tech blog questioning their motives. He moved to turn off his phone, but Min-suk stopped him. Look at the comments on that article, he said. Among the cynical responses, there was a growing thread of support. Users defending the campaign's authenticity, sharing personal experiences, forming impromptu support groups in the comments section. Someone had even started a counter hashtag, #RealTechMindStories. We're creating ripples, Min-suk observed. Every person who shares their story encourages someone else to be honest about their struggles. Jung-ho thought about his own journey. How months ago, he would have hidden his pain behind carefully curated social media posts, just like Sumin taught him. Now, his vulnerability had become his strength, reflected in designs that spoke to others who were hurting. Maybe that's the real measure of success, Jung-ho said. Not trending topics or viral moments, but the quiet changes we inspire in people's lives. Min-suk smiled, reaching across the desk to squeeze Jung-ho's hand. That's exactly what Sung-jin doesn't understand. He sees metrics and engagement rates. We see people. Later that night, Jung-ho posted his first personal social media update in months. No filters, no careful curation, just an honest message about his own mental health journey and what he'd learned about authenticity. He turned off his phone before he could see any responses, but it didn't matter. For the first time since Sumin left, he felt completely aligned with his own truth. The next morning, Min-suk showed him the response to his post. Thousands of people had shared similar stories, creating a wave of authentic conversations about mental health, relationships, and personal growth. Their campaign hadn't just created a trending topic, it had created a movement. The success of their authentic approach to mental health had brought Jung-ho and Min-suk closer than ever. They often found themselves working late into the night, their conversations drifting from campaign strategies to personal confessions. It was during one such evening that something shifted between them. They were sitting on the floor of Min-suk's office, sharing takeout and reviewing user testimonials, when Min-suk suddenly turned to Jung-ho. Do you remember what you told me about trust that first week? About how design was the only thing you could still believe in. Jung-ho nodded, feeling his heart rate quicken. The office felt smaller somehow, more intimate. I don't think that's true anymore, Min-suk said softly. His hand found Jung-ho's in the space between them. I've watched you open up, not just in your work, but with everyone around you. With me. The touch sent electricity through Jung-ho's body, but with it came the familiar surge of panic. Images of Sumin flashed through his mind, her carefully worded breakup post, the perfectly filtered photos with her new partner, the way she'd planned her exit while sleeping beside him every night. Min-suk must have felt him tense because he started to withdraw his hand. Jung-ho caught it before he could pull away completely, but couldn't bring himself to meet Min-suk's eyes. I'm scared, Jung-ho admitted. Not of you, but of this. Everything with Sumin started just like this. Late nights working together, sharing dreams, thinking we understood each other completely. Min-suk was quiet for a moment. Do you know what's different? He finally asked. We built this relationship on honesty, not performance. You've seen me at my worst, arguing with investors, doubting myself, struggling with decisions. And I've seen you rebuild yourself from your lowest point. Jung-ho finally looked up, meeting Min-suk's gaze. The warmth there made his chest ache with both longing and fear. I know you're not her, Jung-ho whispered. But I'm not the same person either. I don't know if I can. Min-suk leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Jung-ho's. Then we take it slow. No pressure, no expectations. Just us being real with each other, like we've been all along. The moment was interrupted by a notification on Min-suk's phone, another message from Sung-jin about an urgent board meeting. The spell broke, and Jung-ho pulled back, the walls around his heart reconstructing themselves. Over the next few days, Jung-ho found himself creating distance. He scheduled meetings when he knew Min-suk would be busy, communicated primarily through email, and avoided the late-night work sessions that had become their norm. Min-suk noticed, of course. He respected the distance, but found small ways to show he was still there. Coffee left on Jung-ho's desk in the morning, encouraging notes about user feedback, gentle smiles across meeting rooms. During a team presentation, their eyes met across the conference table, and the longing in Min-suk's gaze was unmistakable. Jung-ho had to excuse himself, retreating to the bathroom where he splashed cold water on his face. You're being a coward, he told his reflection. But was he? Or was he being sensible, protecting himself from another potential heartbreak? That evening, Min-suk caught him as he was leaving the office. Talk to me, he said simply. Even if it's to tell me you don't want this. Just don't disappear. Jung-ho felt the walls he'd built starting to crack. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Every time I feel myself getting closer to you, I remember how it felt when she left. How stupid I was for not seeing it coming. Jung-ho-ya, Min-suk said, his voice gentle but firm. You're not stupid for having trusted someone you loved. And you're not stupid for being scared now. But don't let her take this from you too. The words hit Jung-ho like a physical force. He'd let Sumin take his confidence, his trust, even his creativity for a while. Was he really going to let her take this chance at happiness too? I need time, he finally said. Not to pull away, but to learn how to do this right. To be sure I'm not running away from something real just because I'm scared. Min-suk's smile was understanding, but there was a hint of sadness in it. I'll be here, he said. Whether you need a business partner, a friend, or... He left the sentence unfinished, letting the possibility hang between them. As Jung-ho walked home that night, he realized that while his heart was still heavy with fear, it was also full of something else. Hope. Maybe that was the real difference between then and now. With Sumin, he'd been playing a role, trying to fit into her curated life. With Min-suk, he was finally learning to be himself, fears and all. The TechMind boardroom felt colder than usual. Sung-jin stood at the head of the table, his presentation displaying graphs of potential revenue streams and market expansion opportunities. The other board members sat in uncomfortable silence as he delivered his ultimatum. It's simple, Sung-jin declared, his voice sharp in the quiet room. Either we pivot to a broader platform with integrated social features and monetization options, or I withdraw my entire investment. TechMind won't survive that kind of financial hit. Young-ho, sitting beside Min-suk, could feel the tension radiating from his body. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about their campaign anymore, but the entire company's future. "You're asking us to abandon our core mission," Min-suk responded, his voice steady despite the pressure. "To betray the trust of users who came to us specifically because we offered an alternative to the typical social media approach." Sungjin's smile was cold. "Your mission won't matter if the company goes bankrupt. The market demands integration, gamification, social features. Your current approach is..." His eyes flickered to Young-ho. "Too niche." "Too honest, you mean?" Young-ho found himself saying. All eyes turned to him, including Min-suk's surprised but supportive gaze. "You want to turn a mental health platform into another addiction-driven social media app. And you're letting personal bias cloud your business judgment," Sungjin countered. "We all know about your situation with the influencer. Perhaps that's affecting your perspective on social media integration." The room grew tense. Young-ho felt his face flush, but before he could respond, Min-suk stood up. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Young-ho has brought more authentic value to this company than all your market projections combined. Our users don't need another platform telling them to perform their lives for likes. They need a safe space to be real." Sungjin's expression hardened. "Then let me be real with you. Without my investment, TechMind dies. All your noble intentions won't matter when you can't make payroll. You have until tomorrow morning to accept my terms." After the meeting, Young-ho found Min-suk in his office, staring out the window. "I'm sorry," Young-ho said. "I shouldn't have let him provoke me." Min-suk turned, and to Young-ho's surprise, he was smiling. "You did exactly what you should have done. You stood up for what we believe in." He walked over to his desk and pulled out a folder.
"And you
gave me the courage to do this." Inside the folder were documents showing interest from several smaller investors, mental health professionals, tech entrepreneurs, and even some of their users who believed in their mission. "They're not big players like Sungjin," Min-suk explained, "but together, they could keep us afloat. I've been gathering these contacts for weeks, but I was afraid to make the move. Afraid of the risk." Young-ho studied the documents, hope rising in his chest. "You're really willing to risk everything? Aren't you?" Min-suk asked softly, and they both knew he wasn't just talking about the business anymore. Their eyes met, and Young-ho felt the last of his reservations crumbling. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." The next morning, they called an emergency board meeting. Min-suk presented their alternative funding strategy, while Young-ho showed real user impact data. Stories of lives changed, communities formed, and healing facilitated through their platform. "We're not just an app," Young-ho concluded. "We're a movement towards authenticity in a digital age. And there are people willing to invest in that vision." Sungjin sat silently through their presentation, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he stood slowly. "You realize this means war," he said quietly. "I have connections throughout the industry. I can make things very difficult for both of you." "We know," Min-suk replied, reaching for Young-ho's hand under the table. "But some things are worth fighting for." As they left the boardroom, Young-ho felt lighter despite the uncertainty ahead. He had finally found someone worth taking a risk for. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. "Whatever happens next," Min-suk said as they walked together, "we face it together." Young-ho squeezed his hand in response. They had chosen authenticity over security, truth over performance, love over fear. Whatever Sungjin threw at them, they would handle it the same way they had handled everything else, with honesty, courage, and each other's support. The Seoul Arts Center glittered with lights for TechMind's Mental Health Awareness Gala. It was meant to be their triumph, a celebration of their campaign's success, and a fundraising event for mental health initiatives. Instead, tension crackled through the air like static before a storm. Young-ho adjusted his tie nervously backstage. In minutes, he would deliver the keynote speech to a room full of industry leaders, potential investors, and mental health advocates. Min-suk appeared beside him, looking sharp in his tailored suit. "You don't have to do this," Min-suk said softly. "I can handle the speech." "No," Jung-ho replied, straightening his shoulders. "This is exactly what I need to do." The spotlight felt hot as Jung-ho took the stage. Hundreds of faces looked up at him, including Sung-jin's smug expression in the front row. Jung-ho took a deep breath and began. "A year ago, I thought I knew what success looked like. It was measured in followers, in likes, in carefully curated moments that looked perfect on the outside while feeling hollow on the inside." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "Then I lost everything I thought mattered, and in that loss, I found something real." The audience was silent, hanging on his words. From the side of the stage, Min-suk watched with pride and concern. Mental health isn't about quick fixes or social validation. It's about being brave enough to be authentic, to admit when we're struggling, to reach out when we need help. That's what TechMind stands for, not another platform for performance, but a space for genuine connection and healing. As Jung-ho spoke about the impact of their campaign, sharing user stories and real results, he saw heads nodding, saw people wiping away tears. Even some of the skeptical investors seemed moved. Then Sung-jin stood up. Speaking of authenticity, he called out, his voice cutting through the applause that had started to build. "Why don't you tell them about the real Jung-ho?" Min-suk started forward, but it was too late. Sung-jin was already projecting images onto the screen behind Jung-ho, old social media posts, court documents, medical records. 3 years ago, Jung-ho was sued for plagiarism by his former design agency, Sung-jin announced. He had a mental breakdown, was hospitalized for severe depression, and lost his position at the company. The case was settled out of court, and all records were sealed. Until now. The room erupted in whispers. Jung-ho stood frozen at the podium, his past displayed behind him in harsh, digital clarity. The plagiarism accusation had been false. He'd been framed by a jealous senior designer. But the breakdown had been real, the hospitalization a dark period he'd worked hard to overcome. "Is this your idea of authentic leadership?" Sung-jin pressed. "Someone who hid his own mental health history while profiting from others' struggles?" The whispers grew louder. Jung-ho felt the room spinning, memories of that dark time threatening to overwhelm him. Then he felt a warm hand on his shoulder. Min-suk had joined him on stage. "Yes," Min-suk said firmly into the microphone. "This is exactly what authentic leadership looks like. Someone who faced his struggles, got help, and used his experience to help others." He turned to face the audience. "Isn't that what we've been advocating all along? That mental health challenges don't define us or disqualify us from making a difference." Jung-ho found his voice again. "Everything Sung-jin just revealed is true," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "I was falsely accused of plagiarism, and the stress triggered a breakdown. I spent 2 months in treatment, learning to cope with anxiety and depression. And you know what? That experience is exactly why our campaign resonates with people. Because it comes from a place of real understanding." The room fell silent. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Others joined in, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous applause. Jung-ho saw tears in people's eyes, saw them standing, saw them recognizing their own struggles in his story. Sung-jin's face contorted with fury. He hadn't expected this reaction. "You're all being manipulated," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the applause. Min-suk stepped closer to Jung-ho, their shoulders touching. "You did it," he whispered. "You turned his weapon into our strength." Later that night, after the gala had ended and the last guests had left, Jung-ho and Min-suk stood on the venue's balcony. The city lights sparkled below them, a reminder of how far they'd come. "I should have told you about my past," Jung-ho said quietly. Min-suk shook his head. "You told me in your own time, in your own way, through every design choice, every campaign decision. I always knew you understood our mission personally. The details didn't matter." As they stood there, Jung-ho realized that Sung-jin's attempt to destroy him had actually set him free. His darkest secret was now public knowledge, and instead of rejection, he'd found acceptance. Instead of shame, he'd found strength. But most importantly, he'd found someone who saw his scars not as flaws to be hidden, but as proof of survival. The aftermath of the gala sent shockwaves through Seoul's tech community. Jungho's revelation and Minsuk's unwavering support had transformed what is meant to be a scandal into a powerful testament to their message. But the victory had come at a personal cost. In the days following the gala, Jungho withdrew into himself. The public exposure of his past had reopened old wounds, and despite the largely positive response, he found himself struggling with familiar demons. He stopped coming to the office, responding to Minsuk's messages only with brief, professional replies. "I need time," he texted Minsuk, "to process everything." But Minsuk could sense there was more to it. The walls Jungho had carefully dismantled over their months together were rebuilding themselves, brick by emotional brick. Then came the video. It appeared on multiple social media platforms simultaneously, a carefully edited montage that painted TechMind's entire mental health campaign as an elaborate marketing scheme. Using manipulated clips from the gala and out-of-context quotes, it suggested that Jungho's breakdown story was fabricated to generate sympathy and boost app downloads. The final clip showed Sumin, Jungho's ex-wife, speaking directly to the camera. "Jungho always had a talent for storytelling," she said, her words carefully chosen. "He knew how to make people feel what he wanted them to feel. That's what made him such a good designer and such a convincing partner." The video went viral within hours. Sungjin had orchestrated his revenge perfectly, using Jungho's past relationship to cast doubt on his authenticity. Minsuk found Jungho in his old studio, surrounded by the ghosts of abandoned projects. The room was dark except for the glow of Jungho's tablet, displaying the growing number of negative comments and accusations. "I warned you," Jungho said without looking up. "I warned you I would destroy everything we built." Minsuk crossed the room and gently took the tablet from Jungho's hands. "No," he said firmly. "You haven't destroyed anything. But you are letting them win by hiding here." "They're right about one thing," Jungho whispered. "I am good at making people feel what I want them to feel. Maybe this whole time, I've been manipulating you too." Minsuk knelt in front of him. "Do you really believe that? That what we've built, all of it, the campaign, our relationship, the lives we've touched, is just another performance?" Jungho finally looked up, his eyes meeting Minsuk's. "No," he admitted. "That's what terrifies me. It's real. You're real. And I'm still waiting for it all to fall apart. Then let me show you something." Minsuk pulled out his phone and opened their app's message board. Thousands of users had posted their own stories in response to the video, defending Jungho and sharing how the campaign had helped them. Many revealed their own histories of mental health struggles, hospitalizations, and recovery. "This," Minsuk said, scrolling through the messages, "is real. This is what happens when you're brave enough to be authentic. You give others permission to be authentic too." As they read through the messages together, Jungho felt something shift inside him. The shame and fear that had defined his past began to lose their power. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a message from Sumin. His hand trembled as he opened it. "I'm sorry," the message read. "Sungjin's people edited my interview to twist my words. I've just posted a video telling the truth. You deserve that much." Minutes later, Sumin's new video was trending. In it, she retracted her previous statements and exposed Sungjin's manipulation. "Jungho's greatest strength was always his honesty," she concluded. "I was the one who couldn't handle that kind of authenticity." The final blow to Sungjin came from his own board of directors. Disturbed by his tactics and the potential legal implications of using stolen medical records, they forced him to step down. The scandal had backfired, strengthening rather than destroying TechMind's reputation for authenticity. In the quiet of the studio, Jungho finally allowed himself to break down. Minsuk held him as years of pent-up fear and shame poured out. When the tears finally stopped, Jungho felt lighter, as if he'd shed a skin he'd outgrown. "I love you," he said simply, the words feeling natural and true. "Not because you saved me or fixed me, but because you let me be broken and real." Min-suk smiled, touching his forehead to Young-ho's. That's all I ever wanted. Just you. Exactly as you are. Months later, TechMind's mental health campaign became a case study in authentic marketing and social impact. But more importantly, it became a symbol of hope for people struggling to be real in a world of carefully curated personas. Young-ho and Min-suk's relationship deepened, built on a foundation of shared vulnerability and unwavering support. The fear of betrayal never completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled Young-ho's life. He had learned that true love, like true healing, wasn't about being perfect, it was about being brave enough to be imperfect together. Their story ended not with a perfectly filtered, happy ending, but with something better, a real one.